Welcome back for the fifth and final round of the Nova Scotia Labor Day Open 2024. This is round 5. And this was a tough one to analyze. I tried to spend a bit of time analyzing it and got kind of burned out with it and had to come back to it a little bit later. And I'll show you through the game. You'll maybe see why. It was a tricky one. So one thing that I really remember about this game when I was playing it is I was just exhausted. This was, like I said, the 5th round of this 5-round tournament. My first 2 rounds went very well. I won those 2 games. The 3rd round, if you've watched that video, you've seen that the 3rd round was very tough. Very proud of that game, but I did lose. The 4th round, I was starting to get a little bit tired. I wasn't playing my best, but I still sort of did what I could, and I did end up losing that game. This one, I was just, I don't know. I think I was just mentally done somehow. And of course, once again, as you can see from the ratings, even though I had just lost 2 rounds, I am playing once again against a very strong opponent, and must confess that I didn't go into this game with very high hopes. But let's take a look at it. I played e4 and got the Alekhine Opening, which I know nothing about. So usually I just play knight c3 and hope that it transposes into something that I know, which isn't really the right way to play. I should, probably actually learn something against it. But we went into sort of a transposition into the Scandinavian Modern variation, which we actually saw back in round 3. We captured here. I brought out my bishop, and black pushed e6. And after knight f3, this is actually the exact same position that we saw in round 3. And in round 3, my opponent pushed c5. In this game, instead, my opponent just went straight for bishop e7, looking to castle kingside. We both castle, and I played d3. Similarly to in round 3, I really think that I should have played d4 here. And this is what the database likes. This is what the engine likes. I'm not quite sure why I didn't. I just thought, okay, I played d3 in my round 3 game and kind of got a decent position out of the opening, so let's just do it again. But in this case, I think with d4, after d4 takes, and then b6 to fianchetto this bishop and bishop f4, I think white just has a pretty nice position, and the engine kind of likes this. My pieces are quite active. I potentially have the b file, and things look pretty good. This bishop can slide down there and potentially attack the h-pawn at some point. Sorry, my desk setup is getting in the way of my mouse here. All fixed. Another option would have been to capture here, but I think after e takes and the bishop slides back, things just aren't feeling fantastic for white. This bishop is going to get out and developed much quicker than this bishop. Black can potentially play c5 and bring the knight out behind. And so I think capturing with my knight is not the right way to go. So I played d3. Black captured with the knight, and we got the b file opened up. And then they went for this queenside fianchetto. I played bishop f4, black played bishop b7. And honestly here, I feel like an issue that comes up later in the game is I just totally underestimated the strength of this light squared bishop. I guess I don't play against a queenside fianchetto very much, except for maybe in like the King's Indian or the Peert's Defense as black, when white fianchettos this way, but I'm also fianchettoed with my dark squared bishop. And so I feel like I know that kind of scenario a little bit, but I don't know. I totally underestimated, I totally underestimated kind of the power of this bishop, which becomes evident a little bit later. So I decided to develop out my rook. They brought their knight, And then I actually played d4, kind of wishing I had played it earlier, but I decided, now is better than never. So I played d4, and now I'm kind of starting to see that I have pretty decent control of this e5 square, and kind of hoping that I can do something at some point to take advantage of the strength on this square. I think probably sensing this, black also tried to kind of fight for this square. I brought my bishop back, as I mentioned earlier, just kind of lining up against the kingside. Black pulled their knight back, and now I guess I kind of wanted to seize the opportunity. Since black wasn't covering the square anymore with their knight, I went ahead and put my knight there. And the engine actually likes this. The engine thinks that this is the right move. The issue here, which I didn't realize during the game, two issues. One, I don't actually know what I'm going to do with my knight there. Like, it seems like the right place to put it. Positionally, I think it is correct, but I don't really know what I'm doing with it. Secondly, this knight was blocking this bishop, and now there's kind of always this threat of the queen coming down and potentially causing problems on my king side. And that's something that I just didn't really take seriously, and I totally should have. So, okay, knight to g6, queen h5. And this is where things kind of start to go wrong, although I haven't realized it yet during the game. Basically, I didn't want their knight to be able to capture here, so I did this nifty tactical trick where if they take, then I actually have a checkmate. Of course, against an 1800 opponent, they're not going to miss that. And probably what would have been better here is something more along the lines of just grabbing their knight, damaging the pawn structure around the king, and then bringing the queen here. So now I still have my bishops lined up against the king side. My queen is over here, and as a bonus, my queen is also defending g2. So it takes some of the sting out of this bishop that could potentially cause some problems. So that is a bit of an inaccuracy, and where in the end, what did I do? Yeah, in the end, I did this instead. A bit of an inaccuracy, probably not a terrible move. I mean, at least my queen is sort of adding a defender here and so on. But my opponent was really good, and he knew exactly how to handle this kind of position. And my attack, really, I didn't have much of an attack, but any semblance of an attack here fizzled out pretty quickly. He captured here. I recaptured with the bishop. And then this move f5 kind of just took it felt like it took all the life out of my position, partly because I was relying on this light squared bishop causing some problems over here. And now I just felt like, okay, that's gone. And now the knight can just capture here. And if the knight captures here and I recapture with my pawn, now things are looking pretty horrible for these isolated doubled pawns over here. And things aren't looking so good. So I brought the bishop back with the idea of not wanting to allow a capture here. Already kind of starting to feel like, okay, I thought I had this really strong e5 square, and somehow quickly it turned around to I have to, run away from e5, which honestly, like something I thought about sort of after the game is the e5 square was strong, but at the same time, having too many trades on e5, I didn't really realize how weak it would make these isolated pawns. The e5 square, I think, would have been even stronger if this pawn was still on b2, and so my structure wasn't damaged quite so badly. So that's just an interesting little tidbit for this kind of pawn structure and kind of this kind of position. But now, after moving my bishop back, I made this move, and then I thought that I blundered because I didn't evaluate this move, f4. And this is not what happened during the game, but I felt like that just loses me a piece. And my opponent didn't play this move, and I was confused. And I was confused until later when I actually analyzed the game, because it doesn't lose me a piece. I felt like, the bishop can only escape to here, and then the queen takes, and I've just lost a piece, because if I take, then I'm just down. But actually, instead of taking the queen, there's this move that saves it. Bishop takes g6, and so then if queen takes, then bishop takes, and it's actually equal here. It's equal material, and the engine says that the position is equal. I didn't see that through the game. I was just, back here realizing that this f4 move was potentially powerful. And this is when my psychology started to go downhill in terms of how I felt about this game, and kind of starting to feel like I lost or was losing or was worse before I actually was. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So black did not play f4. Black played c5 instead. And again, kind of potentially undermining this pawn structure and really highlighting this doubled pawn weakness. I captured here. I don't know if that was the right move. The problem is if black captures without, if I don't address this and black captures, then I actually lose a pawn. So I captured, and then finally black is exploiting this powerful light squared diagonal lined up against my king, temporarily down a pawn, but now I have triple isolated pawns, and I am very quickly going to lose some of them. So I played f3 to defend against this, and also to give my bishop some breathing room in case f4 ever comes later. Black captures with a check. I defend with the bishop, and black captures. So now I'm down a pawn, but I'm actually not worse. And so I knew at this point that I was going to be defending this game, not attacking anymore. I wasn't quite sure what happened. I wasn't sure how I went from thinking I had something going over here on the king side to suddenly I have two isolated pawns and I'm defending with very little kind of going for me in this position. And I felt pretty discouraged. I felt like being a pawn down against such a strong opponent, it felt kind of hopeless, to be honest. It felt like I didn't know what went wrong, and I was just going to lose this game. But eventually, I kind of talked myself out of the discouragement, which that's probably the thing I'm most proud of from this game. For the next few moves, I was just feeling like, yeah, this game is lost, and I don't know if it's worth continuing. Probably I should just resign. But I think that was the wrong mindset, and I'm proud of myself for realizing that during the game, in the heat of the moment. If the only thing that mattered to me, this is what I kind of came to realize during the game. If the only thing that matters is this game or this tournament or this particular moment, then yes, the fact that I am probably going to lose this game is very discouraging. But what actually matters to me is improving at chess, right? That's the reason I'm doing this. That's why I love playing chess, because I love to improve and learn and figure out ways that I can do better. And so playing on in this game for a few more hours and then ultimately losing, getting 0 points for this game in this tournament, it's still really important practice. It means that I'm getting practice and experience and learnings from being in a position like this, which feels like it's lost. It actually isn't lost yet, but feels like it's lost in the moment, and learning some things about how to defend well in a position like this, and, maybe get a draw, or maybe find some counterattacking chances that can pull off something better. But anyway, I don't know how much I'm making sense here, but it was just interesting to me that I recognized the level of discouragement that I felt here, and was able to kind of realize what was going on, and realize that actually, even if I lose this game, it's absolutely valuable at my stage of chess to play on and see what I can figure out here and learn to defend better. And so I did. I played on. I decided that I wanted to get my queen back over here. Again, I recognized I was going to be defending, so my queen way over on this edge of the board is not doing me any good for defense. We played a few more moves, and now this is where I started overly respecting what my opponent was trying to do, and underestimating my own defensive resources here. So I played rook e c1, and I didn't have to do this. The reason I moved my rook here is because I felt like they were piling up, black was piling up on this c pawn, and I needed to add defenders to this pawn. But in this position, that's not really true, because this light squared bishop is actually doing a fine job of defending this pawn. Even if black, manages to double up rooks against this pawn, their queen is at the front of the attack, and they're not going to, take that if there's a bishop here defending. And so for example, let's say I played a4 here instead, which is something the engine likes. It's an idea that I really didn't see, but the idea is kind of pushing this a pawn, breaking things up over here on the queen side. The engine really wants this for the next few moves. So that's kind of an interesting thing to look at. But now, what is black going to do? If black wants to take this pawn, they're going to have to deal with this bishop. And how are they going to deal with that bishop? Well, one idea is to do this and trade off their bishop. But now I can actually go ahead and trade. And one thing that their bishop is doing here is defending their e-pawn. And so if I trade that off, I can take the e-pawn. We trade queens. I lose my c-pawn. But actually, the eval here is 0. This is not better for black, despite black actually being a pawn up. This would have been a perfectly fine position to try to defend. So I was kind of seeing ghosts with this idea of trying to trade off this bishop. And then there's also the idea, after I bring this rook over, and then I see that they're going to try to pile up even further, black, so there's still this issue of if black tries to wrap around here and grab this pawn, then they're going to lose their e-pawn. The other thing I was seeing is maybe black brings their knight and tries to trade off with their knight. But now, with my rook over here, actually, this is perfectly fine. If I push the a-pawn and they trade, now what's black going to do? So they have to move their queen. They're piled up against my rook, but they're not going to sacrifice their queen. And if they do, it ends up just being absolutely losing for them because, they've lost a queen for a rook. And so yeah, taking with the knight doesn't work either. And so I was seeing a lot of ghosts. I was again underestimating how powerful my light squared bishop was at defending. I wasn't really realizing how important their bishop was for defending this pawn. And even with a move like the knight coming in and trying to grab that bishop, there's I wasn't putting enough confidence in my defensive resources here, which I think is a really important thing to learn. When I feel like kind of I'm on my heels, I don't have the initiative, I'm defending, taking a step back and just trying to kind of take stock of, okay, what am I defending? What role are the various pieces playing, both mine and also my opponent's pieces? I think that would have been a really good thing to realize and kind of look at a little bit more closely. Instead, I thought, oh no, they are going to double up the rooks and try to win this pawn. And so I blundered, basically. As I said, this bishop was doing a very important job defending this pawn, and I decided I need to move the bishop there in order to prevent the rook from coming in and doubling up. But of course, that invites a queen trade. And I realized this, and I thought, maybe it's fine. Maybe I can play on from here. But trading the queens really only benefits black, because I'm down a pawn, and bishop c4 is coming. I'm not going to be able to keep my light squared bishop on the board, and just trading down material is better for black because they're up material. So trading down and simplifying the endgame is what I mean, is going to be better for them and not for me. So indeed, there's bishop c4. We traded. And then I kind of went into this sort of defensive mode, trying to really hold on to that pawn. But now, of course, black has time to bring in their knight. And I decided I can't hold on to this pawn. I just need to let it fall and try to do something else. So we kind of shuffled a little bit. I moved some pieces around, moved my bishop around, tried to defend. And then at some point I decided, well, this is probably unsound, but what if I trade all of the rooks off of the board? I'm a pawn down, but then it's in a bishop versus knight kind of endgame with pawns on the board. And my thought was, probably this is still losing, but maybe I can make some chances if I can simplify some of the pawns and take advantage of the fact that the bishop is a longer range piece than the knight. And that's what happened. I did some trades and got it to the bishop versus knight that I was hoping for, but this is still losing. And part of the problem is that I'm going to lose a second pawn because I can't push it. It's just lost. I'm going to lose that pawn. I'm not in time to defend with the king. And so 2 pawns down in this endgame, there's just nothing that can be done. So we shuffled quite a bit. I tried to blockade as many pawns as I could, tried to keep my king as active as I could, keep my bishop on the board. But eventually Black's knight managed to come in, and at some point they got this fork, and they were able to trade off my bishop. And then we traded a couple of pawns, and they went for this pawn, and it was just game over. I resigned in this position because there was nothing left. You know, if I go after this one, Black's just going to have 2 passers over on this side of the board, and there's nothing I can do to save this pawn. I'm not in time to go up and grab this one and promote. There's nothing. There's nothing left. So it was an interesting game, and like I said, when I first tried to analyze this, I didn't really know what went wrong. It was really hard to look at, especially since, you know, way back, I don't know, here or even like even here after I feel like, you know, basically this must be lost, the engine still says that I'm fine. The engine still says that it's roughly, you know, it's roughly equal. Like, what does it say here? Negative 0.2. So Black is like just slightly better. But at this point, in terms of my own psychology over the board, I feel like I'm totally losing. And so that made it really hard to analyze for me. And sorry, I just lost my notes here. It was tough to analyze, and I think there were a few good lessons to learn from this. The first one, as I mentioned, was more about kind of my psychology. It's hard not to get discouraged sometimes, and I find when I get discouraged during a game like I did with this one, and then I go and analyze it later, often it's actually not as bad as I thought. And so, like, keeping that long game in mind, keeping in mind that, you know, my goal here is to improve at chess, which may or may not involve winning or drawing this exact game, but getting as much practice as I can and trying to do as well as I can and learn as much as I can from every game is really kind of the point. I think also one of the things kind of technically I could learn a bit better from this game is maybe how to play the opening a bit better, because I feel like, you know, with the queen move over to the edge and kind of thinking I had an attack, but underestimating that long range bishop on the queen side ended up causing some issues and kind of my messed up pawn structure and misplaying that a little bit. So that was something to kind of learn about this particular sort of opening and pawn structure that we ended up with in this game. And then I think the big lesson is when I'm defending, I need to not underestimate my own defensive resources and, you know, understand that my light squared bishop was doing a really important job defending that pawn. Their light squared bishop was also defending their e pawn, and so they didn't have as much flexibility to move it around as I thought they did. And also just the idea of, like, you know, seeing ghosts and seeing some potential threats, which I saw a lot of them, as I explained, but, you know, looking at them a little bit more closely and deciding, like, is this actually something to be worried about? Like, if they bring their knight in and trade it off for my light squared bishop, is that actually a problem, or is it okay? Does that actually you know, make my position worse? Or, you know, in this case, I take with the pawn and my rook is opened up, and maybe that is actually okay. So not underestimating my defensive resources is something that I'm really taking away from this game, because I totally could have defended this position much better. And after looking at it a few times, I'm starting to understand why. So very interesting game. Thanks for watching. And that is it for the Labor Day Open. It was a great tournament. And actually, let me just show you really quickly the results for me anyway. Despite the fact that I only got a score of 2 out of 5, I actually gained rating points because my games that I won were against lower rated opponents, but the games that I lost, all 3 of them, were against much higher rated opponents. And because they were so highly rated, I actually, even though I lost against them all, I still got a pretty decent performance rating of 1590 and gained 7 rating points. Went from 1536 up to 1543. So, not a lot, but nice to gain rating points instead of lose them. And yeah, it was a great tournament. Shout out to all the organizers who put it together. I hope you enjoyed these recaps. Some more videos coming soon, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.